Welcome to the Weekly Roar, coming live from the Lion's Den, helping new managers become great leaders and awesome bosses. And now, here's your host, Greg Storch.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Lion's Den. This is the Weekly Roar. Today, we're going to continue the recap of our next two leadership lessons. During this Leadership Lessons mini-series, I'm sharing the recap of two lessons learned each week from my last series that was called Lessons Learned in Leadership. Since that series started well over 6 months ago, I want to go back over those lessons in a Reader's Digest fashion and bring back the highlights for you to keep those lessons fresh in your mind. So this week, we're rewinding the clock again and going back to November 2020 and talking about lessons 5 and 6 this week. Now, before we jump into that, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Greg Storch, owner of Lion Enterprise, host of the Weekly Roar, and the founder of a worldwide bartered coaching program called The Helping Hand. I'm a certified professional leadership coach and a certified leadership speaker and trainer. Oh, and as a friendly reminder, you can find all of my video resources on my website at lion-enterprise.com. Just look for the Lion's Pride Library tab, and you can check them all out right there on my website. Okay, let's start with lesson 5. And I shared that one when it was called The Connection Between Passion and Potential. What that lesson was all about was the importance of finding and working in our passion zone in order to be able to reach our potential. During that lesson, I told you that passion, potential, and purpose all play a major role in our mental and physical health, as well as our overall happiness and sense of fulfillment. I shared a statistic that I had found in a Gallup poll that out of the world's 1 billion full-time workers, only 15% of them are engaged at work. That means an astronomical 85% of people are unhappy in their jobs. Now, while there are plenty of reasons why employees might be feeling disengaged with their work, one of those reasons definitely includes not doing what you're passionate about doing. I shared with you the story of when I made the decision to resign from corporate America and how I knew I wasn't passionate about my work in the IT industry. And while I was really good at it, I wasn't on my way to reaching my potential. That's exactly what I told my boss as I handed him my resignation letter on September 19th, 2017. That was 2 days after I turned 50 years old. Mark Twain is credited with the saying, "Find a job you enjoy doing and you will never have to work a day in your life." I even think I remember my dad telling me the same thing, but back then I had no idea what that meant. I was programmed by society, our culture, to get a job and pay my bills. There wasn't any emphasis on thinking about what it is you love to do and then doing that for a living. Just take a job that pays well. Well, here I sit today, and the tables have completely turned. Money is no longer the driving force, and I can honestly say that I am finally doing something that I truly love to do. Now, during that lesson back in November, I shared that following our passion is the key to finding our potential. And when it comes to leadership, passion is an essential asset that we all have to have in our leadership toolboxes. As leaders, passion is what keeps us motivated. It keeps us going when others want to quit. Now, undoubtedly, there are other assets that leaders possess that help them to be successful. But passion is the one thing that fuels us in a way that those other assets can't. Some of the other assets I spoke about during that lesson included talent, opportunities, and knowledge. I said that when it came to talent, that it just isn't enough to help us reach our potential. We also have to have passion. If you want to be a successful person, you have to have more than just talent. When it came to opportunities, I reminded you that it isn't enough to get us to the top in and of itself. Opportunities are what open the door for us, but that's just the beginning of our journey. And without passion, it's going to be a hard road ahead to sustain that journey, especially when times get tough. Here is where I shared that having passion helps us make the most of the opportunities that come our way. But without it, we miss those opportunities. And that's another thing that keeps us from reaching our potential. And then I spoke about why having knowledge just wasn't enough for reaching our potential. Knowledge can also be a great asset for leaders, but being smart isn't what makes us leaders. Just because I have 2 college degrees doesn't automatically mean that I'm going to be a great leader. It's a great asset, but it will never trump your passion. Regardless of these assets you carry around in your leadership toolbox, none of them will help you reach your potential unless one of them is passion. Passion is what separates the extraordinary from the ordinary. It's what gives us the energy and desire to reach our potential. It provides us with the will to achieve. Now, that was another one of my favorite lessons learned, and I'm so glad I learned it and shared it with you. Find your passion and work in your passion zone if you ever want to reach your potential. So that was the 5th lesson. And the following week, I came back into the lion's den and I shared the 6th lesson learned in leadership. And I called that episode, Why You Should Listen More and Talk Less. During that lesson, I talked about why good leaders are great listeners. You see, in general, people just don't really listen well, do they? They're either not that interested in what you're saying, or they're just too focused on their own agenda. I shared some things that can help us be better listeners, and I said that if you really want to listen effectively, then listen past where the other person has finished. We should take a pause before we answer them. Let them get their point, their story, their compliment out, and even their criticism before preparing our response. A great way to ensure understanding is to just ask more about what they said so you can really get engaged and better understand what and why. The point that I was trying to make during that lesson was that being a great listener makes a huge difference for leaders, but it's not as easy as it sounds. The real trick is learning how to listen to understand instead of respond. Stephen Covey actually refers to this as the 5th habit in the 7 habits of highly effective people. And I think it's critical to becoming effective listener. He says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Now, during this particular lesson last November, I shared several reasons why I believe that effective listeners are better leaders. The first reason I shared was that in order to lead others, we have to be able to understand them first. As I had mentioned earlier, most people listen with the intent to just reply in front of their minds, but true leaders know that in order to empathize and connect with others, they have to first understand them, and that understanding comes from good listening. I shared a quote during that lesson from my mentor, John Maxwell, who always says that when it comes to leading people effectively, you have to touch their hearts before you ask for a hand. Not only is it unfair to ask for help from someone with whom you haven't connected with, it's really not very effective. Remember this: to have the right effect, you're going to have to connect. Then there was the second reason why I believe we have to be good listeners to be better leaders. And that was because listening really is one of the best ways for us to learn. Typically, during conversations, people simply react to the latest comment. But the best leaders are listeners, and they're listening to learn. Conversations to them aren't a back and forth so much as they are a path to receive new information. This is why God gave us one mouth and two ears. Sometimes leaders just need to take on more of a student role than a teacher role. And when we're the student, we have to listen if we want to be sure to learn. Now, the third reason why I believe we have to be good listeners to be better leaders was because listening can keep small issues from becoming big problems. Effective leaders allow others to tell them what they need to hear and not necessarily what they want to hear. And I shared this awesome Indian proverb during that lesson, and it said, "Listen to the whispers and you won't have to hear the screams." Good leaders tune into the small stuff. They listen to not only what others are saying, but they also tune into what's not being said. In order to do that, you have to have good listening skills because it requires us to have a good understanding of people. And that brought me to the fourth and final reason why I truly believe that good listeners make better leaders. And that was because it also helps us to build trust with others. And trust, as you know, is the foundation upon which we build our leadership. Effective leaders are always good communicators, and that doesn't mean just being a good talker. People want to be listened to. They want to be respected and understood. So it's a big mistake for leaders to spend their time ensuring they express their own ideas and feelings. As a reminder, if you want to be an effective leader, remember that when followers no longer feel like you're listening to them, they will go find a real leader who will. And if you don't have any followers, you aren't really leading, are you? That's why listening, really listening to your people, is so critical in so many ways. I think one of the biggest values from that lesson was the tips that I provided on how to become a better listener. Let me share those again with you real quick as a refresher. Now, first was make yourself available to others. A lot of leaders shy away from emotional interactions, but good leaders know how to make themselves approachable and show empathy when their employees are in need of attention. Whenever we position ourselves like that for our people, they'll be more comfortable speaking to us. And when they talk, we listen. The second tip was ensure you're creating a culture where people feel empowered to speak up and share their opinions. And when they do, make sure not to judge or criticize when they share different ways of approaching problems or solving them. Then the third tip I shared that day was whenever someone is speaking to you, make eye contact with them. Don't be looking around the room and at everything else other than the person you're speaking to. Now, keeping your eyes on them allows you to have a better awareness around what's being said and how it's being said. And then the last tip I shared was to stop focusing on preparing your response while the other person is still speaking. I promise you that if you just listen to what the person is saying, your response will come naturally. There's no reason for you to get prepared in your response. Just be compassionate by not interrupting the flow of the conversation. When leaders exercise their patience in listening, they easily gain respect from others. I love this lesson learned because it flows into other areas of our lives and not just our leadership. So I'll leave you with this final reminder from the lesson that day. If you want to be a better leader, a better parent, a better spouse, a better friend, then be a better listener. By becoming a great listener, you will be well on your way to becoming an effective leader who knows how to bring out the best in others. And we can't get the best out of others if we don't know things about them, like who they are, where they come from, where they're wanting to go, how they think, and what they can contribute. We only learn those things by listening to them. Remember, the ability to hear is a gift. The willingness to listen is a choice. All right, everyone. There's this week's recap of the 5th and 6th lessons learned in leadership. The importance of passion when it comes to reaching our potential and how listening makes us better leaders. Now, if you want to keep running to the roar, then join me next week as I continue these micro lessons in review and recap the 7th and 8th lessons learned in leadership. All you have to do is just come on back to the Lion's Den next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks, everybody, for supporting me and watching the Weekly Roar today. I appreciate you coming back. And until we meet again next Wednesday, remember, be powerful, but stay poised just like a lion. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for watching the Weekly Roar live event at lionenterprise.com. If you enjoyed this video, please tell others to join us each week here in the Lion's Den. Thanks again, and see you next week.